Hi, in this lecture, what we're going to talk about is a little bit about Chapter 1. We're going to be giving you the basics of communication. Just a quick recap. If you have had human communication, you've no doubt covered this subject, but if you haven't had it yet, for the benefit of those people, we're going to talk about the differences in all the different types of communication. There's interpersonal communication, computer-mediated communication, mass communication. So we are going to explore what all of those mean in this video. So the first, most basic type of communication, one you've probably experienced today if you have looked another human being in the eyes, is interpersonal communication. The definition by textbook of this means two or more people are in a conversation, and your textbook takes a pretty serious stance on this and says that true interpersonal communication has no technological interference. That means no cell phones, no tablets, no Facebook. You are only interpersonally communicating if you are making eye contact with another human being. So I think that type of communication is getting fewer and farther between today, but that is the true definition of interpersonal communication. That type of communication takes very little preparation, and also the stakes are kind of the highest there too, because you get instantaneous feedback on a number of levels that you can't always control. With mass communication, this is actually where we're going to spend most of our time this semester, vastly different than interpersonal communication. It's the process by which a complex organization, with the aid of one or more machines, like my SpongeBob reference there, the machine part is very important, video cameras, equipment, computer equipment, that company produces and transmits public messages that are going to be directed at very large, heterogeneous, and scattered audiences. Now, mass communication is not the same thing as mass media. Mass media are defined as the channels that are used for mass communication. So mass media would be, like I said, the channels. That means a radio would be a channel, or a television, or film. That's mass media. Mass communication are the organizations and the processes that those organizations use to develop content for us to consume on those mediated channels. So we've got kind of a difference there in terms. Even though we tend to throw the terms around interchangeably, they don't always mean the exact same thing. So it's very important to make that distinction. Now, bringing the two together, interpersonal and mass comm or media communication, we've got computer-mediated communication, also known as machine-assisted communication. Like I said, this is kind of a combination of interpersonal and mass comm. This computer-mediated communication is also referred to as CMC in a lot of research, and this is where we are spending a lot of our time today. It is interpersonal in a way because we are engaging in a conversation with one or more individuals, but it's also mass communication in a way because in a true interpersonal conversation, the potential for those conversations to spread beyond that pair are a little bit more limited than they are in the mass communication setting, and also the publicity and the viewability and the shareability of those conversations are different too. So it's important to understand the distinctions there. Now I need to spend a little bit of time also talking about the communication model, and this refers to kind of a visual way to explore what communication is. This is the standard communication model that you will see in any number of basic communication textbooks. There are a couple of components you need to be aware of. You can't have communication unless you have a sender of a message. This person has to encode messages. That means if I'm the sender of a message, I have to translate my thoughts into words or symbols that another person would understand. If you are interpersonally communicating with a person who does not speak the same language as you, the encoding part gets really difficult. You maybe can't encode your message in words, but you might rely on things like hand gestures or pointing, or research tells us that a lot of times we'll say the words in our native language and just say them louder to the person who doesn't speak our language, which is kind of funny to me. They can't understand quiet or loud. Now, once we are the responsible senders of messages, then we have a very important decision to make. We have to pick what channel we want to send our message through, and the channel is really just referring to the way that you will communicate your message. Are you going to pick up the phone and call a person? Doubtful. A lot of us hate phone calls these days. Are you going to use the verbal channel and look at a person and tell them a message? Are you going to write a post-it note? Are you going to text the person? Will you email them? Will you Snapchat them? Will you tweet at them? Will you send a carrier pigeon? I mean, the channels we have today are kind of almost endless, really. There are a number of different channels we can use to communicate. These include channels also would be things like billboards and radio ads and television shows and TV ads and movies. So if you think about it, the channel is really where a lot of miscommunication starts to happen. How many times have you been the receiver of a message via text and you interpret it the completely wrong way than the sender intended it, only because a text doesn't facilitate the same level of interaction as a face-to-face message. This gets at the hallmark of where, like I said, a lot of miscommunication happens. The terminology for that is called media richness. Media richness refers to just how much can be communicated in one channel. If you are face-to-face in a true interpersonal situation, that's really the gold standard of all channels. You get a number of communication signals that you don't get in other situations. You can physically touch another person, which is what makes interpersonal so special. We have the capabilities to web chat, FaceTime, Skype, Google Hangout, take your pick. Those technologies are amazing. I know I FaceTime regularly with my mom, and that brings us closer because we don't live very, very close together right now. So it's great, but it's not the same as a true interpersonal situation. And the farther down the list you go and the type of channels we have, the more you see that some channels really just don't allow you to communicate this on the same level. In fact, interpersonal scholars once said, whenever email first became a thing, the interpersonal scholar community got really upset. They said, you know what, there's no way email is ever going to catch on as a legitimate way to communicate because you can't communicate emotion in a text-based message. Well, we proved them wrong, didn't we? Because how do you communicate emotion in a text? We've got emoticons and now emojis that allow us to communicate a range of emotions and a range of other things that we would want to say out loud just in a visual form. So we do have the opportunities to communicate a number of different things that we wouldn't necessarily have in the past because our technology channels today are so well developed. That's media richness. Anytime you miss out on verbal or nonverbal cues because the medium just can't facilitate them, then you have missed an opportunity for media richness. Now, we've also, of course, through all this, got the message that we are communicating. This is a very important part of the communication model. In a message, there's always two parts to the message. There are the words that you are saying to a person, and then there is the relational meaning behind that, meaning what are you really saying. For example, if I ask my roommate to please sweep the floor, it could be more than just a simple request. It could be me also hinting subtly that you are a slob and I want you to clean up after yourself. So that's also where miscommunication starts to happen. Of course, we've mentioned this person. The receiver is on the other end from the sender, and they're the person who gets the message. And in most communication situations, we have some degree of feedback that gets back to the sender. This is where the receiver has a responsibility to acknowledge receipt of a message from the sender. This could be a response text. This could be a response email. If you are in an interpersonal situation, this could be a smile or a laugh or a head nod or, oh my God, I'm so sorry. The opportunities for feedback are pretty limitless too. And this brings me to a really interesting phenomenon we've got now. I know a lot of our students today, myself included, are really enjoying using Snapchat. And I think one of the reasons that Snapchat doesn't feel great to a lot of older people is because it misses out on that feedback. You're not expected to respond to every snap you send. Unlike other social media, you can't really like a snap like you would a post on Facebook or a picture on Instagram or retweet something like you would on Twitter. And so the opportunities for feedback are very limited considering the other social media we have. So Snapchat's an example that kind of breaks this model that doesn't really require feedback, and that's why it makes a lot of people uncomfortable and also why a lot of people enjoy using it. Now, throughout the model, we have to deal with the aspect of noise, which is anything that distracts you from the communication process. Noise can take the form of physical noise or psychological noise. So physical noise would be, let's say we're trying to have a conversation in my office, but there's a jackhammer right outside the window. It's going to be kind of hard to focus. Or if you are trying to have a conversation with an adult when there are one or more toddlers in a room, there's a lot of noise that will distract you from that. Psychological noise would be maybe not something that you hear, but something that's going on internally. I know for me, it's hard for me to communicate clearly if I'm hungry. That's psychological noise. I need a snack in order to think and in order to be fully present in the moment. Maybe you're really tired one day in class and you just don't want to sit there and listen to a professor lecture. That's psychological noise. Or maybe you have a really serious event happening in your life and it's just making it very difficult for you to focus and function. That's another example of noise. And that's one of the other reasons why communication can be so very difficult today. We have a number of things working against us. Sometimes that noise takes the form of other people interrupting an impersonal conversation with like a text message or someone picking up their phone just to look at Facebook. That can be a form of noise too. So you can see based on this visual model of communication why communication is so very difficult today. Now, regardless of how careful we are with communication, mistakes still happen. This is one of my favorite examples. You might be familiar with the darn you autocorrect phenomenon. If you've ever had a text message that's been autocorrected to the wrong thing, you feel me, you know where I'm coming from. This is a picture I found on Twitter recently. My mom ordered a cake for my sister's birthday and asked for a blonde girl on top, but it autocorrected to blind, and we got this as our cake. As you can see, there's a blind girl on top of the cake as opposed to a blonde girl. So mistakes still happen no matter how hard we try to communicate, and sometimes we think we're communicating and we're really not. So what we're going for in any communication process is this notion of shared meaning, ultimate goal of all communication interactions. If maybe you are like me and have a friend you've had in your life for a very long time, it's pretty easy to relate to that person, easy to connect to them. In my example, I have had the same best friend since the first day of kindergarten. I kid you not. Casey and I met within 2 minutes of me walking in the classroom, and we have been best friends ever since. We don't talk every day. We don't see each other very often because we live far apart now, but if she calls me, I can tell by the way she says hello if she's sad or happy or what's going on. You probably have a person who's like that in your life too. That's an example of shared meaning. You really understand where the person's coming from, and there's rarely a miscommunication that happens. It's really what we're going for. All right, that is my short overview of what the gist of communication is. We'll continue on with another lecture here very soon. Thanks for watching.